Welcome to Frostbyte FAQ Fridays. This beer is delicious, and so are you. So let's get this out of the way. Am I paid by Budweiser? No, I'm not. Neither is Peyton Manning. We just really enjoy this beer, and then we also like to tell the whole world about it. Future of Frostbyte FAQs. So as you might have noticed, this video is weeks and weeks and weeks after I did my last FAQ, which was to be expected because I did say that it was probably going to be holding me off a little bit due to all the stuff that's going on right now in my life. None of it is bad though, so don't worry about that. But I still will be coming out with FAQ Fridays whenever I get a chance. I'm essentially just going to let the questions accumulate a little bit more, and then I'll try to answer the bulk of them. I still have more questions to answer in an FAQ, which I'm saving for another video on the next FAQ, so if I didn't get around to your comment or question, don't worry about it. I definitely will be hitting them, especially Facebook questions. I really haven't gotten around to a lot of my Facebook messages when it comes to these videos, so if you ask me on Facebook, wait until video number 7. That's when I will start answering the questions on there. Right now, these are all mostly the things that I'm getting on YouTube. Boiling bass strings does not remove the flat spots. When you play bass strings for a while, when they've been on there, and you're abusing them, you know, you're plucking at them, you use your fingers, you use a pick, you kind of get at them, you end up flattening the string, especially when they're round wound, when the whole string is completely round, you end up flattening the string at certain spots on the neck, especially where the frets are located. So when you're pushing in on the strings and when you play the strings, a lot of times around the pieces of metal hitting each other, a lot of times that will create wear and you'll end up kind of getting kinks in each part of your string where there are frets. So when you boil the strings, they won't flatten out. Those dents are actually going to be there. The strings will get softer for a small amount of time where they might pop out a little bit, but not significant enough to actually go back to a round shape like the string was before. The boiling method is just to clean the strings to get a usable tone. It really doesn't bring the strings back to life. It just makes it a lot more usable than the dead strings that you have on before. You can use rubbing alcohol to clean bass strings. This actually is true, and something that I missed when I was talking about boiling strings. Boiling the strings is an older method, something that I've been told to do from bass players that have been playing since the 60s. Putting them in rubbing alcohol is actually a slightly newer method, but it has been around for a very long time, just like boiling the bass strings. And essentially it works the same way. It really cleans the strings up so that they essentially become a little bit brighter. At least they'll essentially be brought back to life as far as removing the dust from the strings goes. So they're of course not going to sound anywhere near what they sounded like out of the package. They are going to sound a lot brighter than dead strings. So yes, rubbing alcohol absolutely does work. You can put your bass strings inside a rubbing alcohol. You don't have to boil the alcohol at all. My only problem is the fumes. When you have rubbing alcohol, when you have a lot of it poured somewhere, you end up getting a lot of fumes that ends up giving you a headache. So it's better to do when you have ventilation, proper ventilation, so that you don't get dizzy or anything like that. It's a lot less work than boiling them because you essentially just have to pour rubbing alcohol into a big bowl, put the strings in there for, I would say, a half hour maybe at the most, and take them out and wipe them down and toss the rubbing alcohol. And then you're done. Usually that's all you need. I wouldn't say this is better than boiling. I'd say that it's just as good as boiling. Both of them get the strings thoroughly clean. There isn't one method is better than another. Some people use one, some people use the other. I'm going to try the rubbing alcohol method myself. I'm going to buy some rubbing alcohol and toss it in a bowl and see what the strings sound like before and after. But of course, if you want to save money and you don't want to buy any rubbing alcohol, if you don't have any in the house, then getting water and boiling the strings works just as well. Have you ever tried Angular Tone Hammer, Dark Class BK7, the Eden WTDI, etc. instead of the SansAmp? I have used each of the ones that you listed, and I have absolutely loved all of them, especially the Dark Glass. I fell in love with the BK7 when I first plugged into it. I really wish it was around when I started using the SansAmp because I love the distortion and the overdrive on that unit. Same thing goes for the Eden. The World Tour DI is phenomenal. I have used it in a few situations, and it's just like going through an Eden amp into a mixing board or anywhere else that you're plugging into. I absolutely love that. The reason that I chose the SansAmp, or the reason that I continue to use the SansAmp, is because that it's essentially what was introduced to me first. I wanted an overdrive unit. I was looking at something to kind of grit up my signal, something that, you know, would change from the traditional clean signal that I was using. I had a combo amp at the time. I was turned to the SansAmp. It had a drive knob on there, which was phenomenal, which I had plugged into and I loved. It sounded like an SVT, which was the tone that I was looking for. I really just wanted a nice, warm, tubey, overdriven sound that I could sculpt to anything that I wanted to sound like, and the SansAmp was actually the one that was able to get me there. If I had access to any of the other pedals, then I would have used the other pedals. There's nothing that makes the SansAmp better than all those other pedals. It was just that I was introduced to the SansAmp first, and so since then, I've seen what it's done for me, and I've absolutely loved it. But if I had to use the Tone Hammer DI, or if I had to use the Eden DI, I would have no problems with that. They are phenomenal DIs. That being said, the BK7 by Dark Glass actually almost got me to switch. I almost considered ripping out my SansAmp and then using the BK7 as my sole preamp, as the one that I would use for everything. But because I love the SansAmp so much, and because I actually have another SansAmp, I have two. I have the floor model, the bass driver, and then I have an RPM, which is a rack mount model. And I actually like to run them together. So what I did instead is I purchased a B3K, and what that essentially does for me is it took the overdrive circuit that I really like, the tone part of the pedal that I absolutely love, and integrated that into my pedal board, which I'm going to be doing a video for when I can. So the biggest rival that, at least for me, when it comes to the SansAmp, has actually been that pedal from Dark Glass. I absolutely love it. If you're in the market for for a bass DI, I would absolutely check out Dark Glass. They have fantastic products. Another thing that I really wish that all the other companies did, and to my knowledge they don't. SansAmp, the Tech 21 is the only company that does this, but I like rack mountable version of units. I absolutely love rack mount. I would get a road case, and if all my pedals on my pedal board were able to be rack mounted, I would love that. I love the way that it looks next to an amp. I know it's bulkier, I know it's bigger, I know that it's the thing of the past, but I prefer it because if it's something that I'm going to plug into all the time, then I would love to have it right next to my amp. I'd love to have it integrated, whatever I'm going to do. I would love to have a Dark Glass, maybe a B7K or anything like that, a rack mountable, maybe a one-space rack mountable unit that I could put right on top of my amp, so that I could plug right into it and plug into the amp, leaving room for actual effects on the pedal board and putting the things that you're always going to use into the rack. I'm getting a 5-string bass. What string gauge should I use for drop B or drop D? I would actually use a light gauge of strings, and when I say that, I mean the thickest string would be about 125. 130 is a standard gauge. 135 would be a heavier gauge. And the reason I say this is because when you're tuning to drop B on a 5-string bass, and you plan on using the 5th string, you plan on using the thickest string, you are technically tuning up. Drop B is technically higher than B standard. So a 5-string bass, which would be tuned to B standard, in order to get to drop B, would be tuning up. You would take your B string, you would leave it there, you would take the string above that, and you would tune that up to F sharp, and then you'd take the string above that and tune that up to B, and so on and so forth. And for drop D, those same strings would work because you would essentially just use your higher 4 strings, and you would just tune that down to D and it would be fine. So I would recommend a light gauge of strings on a 5-string bass guitar for those two tunings. 34 or 35-inch scale for 5-string bass? Both. If you can find a 35-inch scale 5-string, I would absolutely go for it. B string is going to have a lot more integrity. The tuning is going to have a lot more integrity. Your first position is going to sound a bit better than it does on 34-inch scale. A 34-inch scale is going to be a little bit more common. Now, that being said, it's usually assumed that you're not really going to deviate from the B standard tuning on a 5-string bass, so 34-inch scale for B standard is usually fine for B, E, A, D, G. But when you're going to be erratically tuning to other things, especially when you're going lower, and when you're going to drop A standard, F sharp, and all those kinds of things, a longer scale length, of course, is going to do wonders for that. So the longer the scale length, the better. Any unique bass techniques you want to tell us about? No unique bass techniques, but since you do bring that up, I have been recently practicing the floating thumb technique. And the floating thumb technique is taking your thumb and moving it away from the pickups. So when you're playing with your fingers, instead of having your thumb on the pickup like this, and then, you know, going up the strings and kind of anchoring, it is more of moving with the strings, using the E and the A strings as thumb rests when you're playing higher up. So that's it for Frostbyte FAQ Friday number 6. If you guys have any questions, ask down below, ask me on Facebook, ask me on Twitter. Check out my other FAQ Fridays, just in case I might have answered the question already. Check out my SYRUS MANTON channel. It's my vlogging channel that I do fun stuff on, just to entertain yourselves. Do not worry, these are not the only videos I'm going to be coming out with from now on. I do have a gear review coming out, even actually before the next FAQ, so keep on the lookout for that one. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.